Okay. Welcome everyone to the nightly Q&A for the 2022 Blood in the Snow Film Festival, hosted by Superchannel. I'm your host, Rob Bellamy, host of Bits Radio. If you would like to hear this show and many others, please tune into www.bitsradio.ca. But for this festival, we are Bits TV, and tonight we are here with some of the filmmakers from The Devil Comes at Night and Bits programmer Carolyn. How is everybody today?
Awesome.
Great.
Fantastic.
What we'll do, if you don't mind, we'll start with Scott and then go to Adrian in that circle, and we'll just introduce you and let us know what your position and what you did in the project is. So, Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Lever. I was the director, co-writer, co-producer on the project.
Perfect. Adrian?
I'm Adrian Kress. I was also a co-producer and a co-writer, and I also played the character of Amy.
Nice. And Ryan?
Howdy, I'm Ryan. I played Ben, and I was also a co-writer and producer on this project.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to come up with one question right away because I felt this similarity. This movie feels like Night of the Living Dead because you have these people alone, being surrounded, and Ryan's character's name, Ben. Was that a coincidence?
It was definitely not a coincidence. We just before this interview, we were wondering if anybody would catch that, actually. Yes, it's definitely an homage to Night of the Living Dead. And then, of course, Ben sharing the name of the character Ben in Night of the Living Dead was on purpose. And it was, it was a huge part of why we made the movie. We love those sort of small, like indie horrors that were such an influence for all of us.
How much of an influence did it have when you were actually doing the writing itself, like other than just the name? Because it does have its own flavor, this film, but it also, you can see some of the same similarities. How much did it play a part in the actual writing?
I think this was definitely a love letter to a lot of, especially for me, my favorite horror movies. You'll see bits and pieces of The Shining in there. You'll see bits and pieces of Night of the Living Dead. You'll see some of the other great, like I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. I mean, I'm sure we all are, but like The Thing and Halloween, like there's definitely bits and pieces of everything in there.
I can see that. Yeah. And yeah, you can't be, here and not be a John Carpenter fan. That's just impossible. So then I have to ask, what made you decide to start this project now? Because if I heard correctly, you started filming in 2020. Was it pre-blip or was it already started? Have we jumped into that rabbit hole we're now getting?
We were in the thick of it. We were in the thick of COVID time at that time.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it was one of the catalysts for making the movie. A lot of us work in film, and when the pandemic first hit, a lot of us lost our gigs and we lost our jobs, and we were sitting there and wondering, none of us knew what the future was going to hold. So we decided, let's get all of us together and go make a kick-ass horror movie in the woods.
Makes sense.
Sort of like I am obviously a fan of horror, but I'm also a huge wuss. So a lot of my references end up being like musicals. Very Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney. We have a barn. Let's put on a show kind of feeling. And we did it October 2020. So all COVID protocols bubbling. So you're making a movie that's about people trapped in a house, but we were also kind of literally trapped in that house as well. So very life imitating art, imitating life going on.
And it helps that we liked each other, right? So Scott and Adrian and I have been friends for a long time. And so during the COVID, things obviously slowed down. And so Scott was like, "What are you doing?" Like, "Nothing." "What are you doing?" It's like, "Well, let's work on something. Let's make something." And it kind of was like making the best of not the best situation, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, at least you liked each other when the project started, right?
That's right.
Mortal enemies now. Like this is true. I'm married to Scott, so it's like
we could have shared a camera. We didn't.
Yeah, we were in that room.
There's the production right there. That's it. Now, you also shot it in October too. So like you went to the scariest place possible and shot a scary movie in the scariest month possible.
100%. And we found out that the local town we were outside of was also having a scarecrow festival where they put scarecrows everywhere. And it was so bizarre and meta. And it was just like, well, this is horrifying.
They literally hang scarecrows from like lights, the street lights. And I've always just, what are you just trying to have your own horror movie? Like they come to life at night, like obviously, guys.
And I'm such a city kid too that just being out in the woods at a cabin, I forget. Oh, there's none of this ambiotic light, extra light, right? So when it got dark, like after 7 or 8, it was really, really dark. And we actually had a blackout one day, so that didn't help either.
It was so bizarre. We had we were working with Nix lights, which are sort of battery operated, and so when the power went out one night, all we had was our set lights, and you could literally stick your hand out the front door, and it would just be completely a wall of black, and you would lose your own hand outside in that darkness.
That's not freaky at all.
It worked though, because I kind of drew parallels to The Sunken Place in a way, where you can't see anything, like you're kind of engulfed in this darkness. And I love that claustrophobic feel where, Ben and Amy cannot leave this house and beyond is just darkness. So I think you really captured that well. You used the pandemic, because I see a lot of, films as a programmer, and sometimes they can use the pandemic to their benefit, and sometimes it's a one-room film. But this really has that feel, right? So it has that feel. Yeah, no, and I'm like, this works because you don't know what's beyond, but you're pulling parallels from other influences in such a great way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I have to agree with Carolyn, because literally where that truck was parked, when they stepped beyond the truck, they, like you guys said, when you stuck your arm out the door, they disappeared.
And that's not augmented. I always have to tell people this. This isn't something, we've futzed with in post. It's just that dark. It's to the point where, as an actor, I don't think I leave the porch in darkness at all in the movie. Other actors did. And there'd be moments I'd be standing on the porch and these guys would be out, past just talking cues and making sure, the timing, because there's a lot of running out of the dark, right? And I'd be like, are they out? I actually don't even know if they're actually out there. Are they out there? Are they inside? They come back in? I could not see them.
So go ahead, Ryan.
I'm just saying that it reminded me of one moment when Ben does go out, and then we're shooting the scene where I have to come back, and Scott says, I'll give you a cue when to come. And I get out there and I realize I can't see this cue at all. This is going to have to be, you're going to have to say go.
Yeah.
See, this would be the ideal production to work on, because I literally record myself for a couple hours and just play it, and then I could take off, and you guys would not know if I was gone.
No idea.
We really wouldn't.
Just on a loop, just saying some lines.
Yeah. When we were talking with our DP, Nelson Rogers, when we were kind of planning it, we knew we wanted to do that and sort of do a movie with light that sort of is a precious resource. It's like we really wanted to kind of play with the idea that these characters are sort of trapped in this ocean of blackness, and they're just staying afloat in these islands of light. And it was just perfect to shoot it up north, because there is absolutely no light you don't bring yourself, especially like once the sun has completely set. You're just swimming in complete soup of black.
How much of a nervous breakdown did your DP have when he first saw the set?
Oh, I mean, he is so fantastic, but weeks of prep, there was discussions about what cameras to use that we could get away with this kind of darkness. And then of course, what kind of lenses we could use to shoot in such small spaces, but also kind of still make the characters feel overwhelmed and make it feel different in different parts of the house. So I think he's a little grayer in the hair now, but he did such a good job.
Well, I think you guys also did a great, because the hunt for a flashlight that not only did what a flashlight does, but lit our faces was a genuine challenge, because generally you either have a lantern or a flashlight, but doing double duty. And these flashlights, which we have actually left up north, are are so amazing, and we had so many. They are so great. Like, I just want them to be our sponsors. But the idea that like they have a lantern that goes up into our faces, and it was a challenge just to find that.
I know when I first started watching the film, I thought that was brilliant as far as lighting goes, because you still had your show on the like your thing, but you're not black behind the flashlight like normal. And I thought that's brilliant. I want one of those.
Thank you. Yeah.
And the first scene where Ben is trying to turn on the light, this was my first time using it as Ryan the actor. So the difficulty that happened was actually me trying to figure out how to open this with a damaged hand already. So it was as a prop actor, as I like to call myself, it helped a lot.
So there's the editor going, "This one feels the most genuine." Well, that's
I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, Rob. I have a couple of questions for Adrian and Ryan. So, Ryan, I'll start with you. So, there's, as Rob was saying, there's a connection to Night of the Living Dead and Ben and Dwayne Jones, and he's this really noble character. And Ben in The Devil Comes at Night is an anti-hero. He's kind of this guy, he's an opportunist, and he's not the most upstanding guy, but you took that flawed character and you made him human. Like I was rooting for Ben, even though he wasn't the best guy. Can you talk about creating that feeling for that character?
Well, I mean, that's something that really attracted me to doing the movie to begin with, when Scott did the first pass at the draft, dealing with this anti-hero. And I think what was crucial to me was to always find a glimmer of hope that all human beings can be redeemable, so long as they get out of their own way. There's always hope, no matter how dark it is. Dark in our movie, there's always that little glimmer of light that if we keep as our northern star, we keep going, right? Otherwise, there'd be no reason to have a movie if we just like, oh, this is a bad guy. We don't really care what happens to him, right? It should be like, oh, this guy's flawed, but maybe he could be good. And so throughout the movie, I found myself on the hunt for what things this man might want to do to change his life. Or not.
Right. I think that the fact that he's, it's a black guy who, there's a lot of roles for black people that you always have to take the high road, and sometimes it doesn't seem realistic. So to have, I mean, there's good intentions, and like he's just a dude, like he's human, and he has good and bad traits. And I that really spoke to me. I thought that was really interesting. So
great. I'm glad you said that, because you're absolutely right. As a black actor, I find that oftentimes if you have to be the lead, you have to be above reproach. You have to be this perfect human being, which isn't a human being. That's a robot. No. So yeah. And so many of these anti-heroes we see that have been so famous over the years have been these grizzled white guys who are allowed to be a bit of a bad dude, but also they're still a good guy at the end of, you know what I mean? Bruce Willis in Die Hard, you know what I mean? So I was really glad to get the opportunity to put that on its head.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very nice. Adrian, your take on Amy for that.
Well, it's interesting actually, because I feel there is almost, I think it's getting a bit better, but a similar burden on female main characters, but the opposite, in that they have to be perfect. And not in the opposite. I mean, like in the opposite of white male characters is what I mean. So they too also have to be perfect, but often it's like this flawless, like badass. I don't know what I really liked about Amy. All right, first of all, I am also a novelist. I'm an author, so I consider librarians all superheroes. So to be a librarian, first of all, but secondly, all jokes aside, I really liked that she's very competent. She's not, I don't know, not a victim, whatever that really even means, but not not badass. Like she definitely does what needs to be done, and we've sort of looked at compared various characters and their what they do to other people, and I realized that Amy does a lot. But it's with a great deal of vulnerability and a great deal of a person who's never been in this situation before, and just sort of reacting in the moment. It's like, all right, I'm being pragmatic. This needs to happen, so we need to do this. But terrified, as I would definitely be, and not, so Ben has the boxing. She's a library. She has, I guess, the researching, but it's without having sort of that physical strength necessarily either. I think it's nice to play in a very similar way a complicated female character, though she's not as anti-hero as the Ben character. She doesn't have to be perfect either, which is really nice too.
You're right, because there's either the damsel in distress or there's the Linda Hamilton that's all geared up and ready to go.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with, honestly, either of those. And I think that's actually sort of the point, too, that you guys are making, is that it's great for all these characters to exist. We just want more variety of characters to play.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and she's like the perfect character for Ben to end up with. She's part of the town. She's a librarian. Again, shout out to library. I used to work in a library. So, I mean, the most resourceful set of humans. And so, like, that's really clever. I thought that was very clever because she knows the town to an extent. So, and she's part of the community. So to kind of match her up with Ben, who's an outsider, that worked so well. And like the chemistry and like the banter between them, it really helped reveal the story in such a fantastic way.
Well, thank you. And I will say that one of the great joys of getting to work with Ryan is that, like, a lot of our banter is I feel like you need to do a drinking game of how many times we eye roll at each other as Ben and Boomy. And it was so great. I mean, it's so good to. I mean, Ryan is like such a professional, incredible actor, and I feel like I learned so much working. But I love their dynamic, and I love that it's this sort of, in the end, almost sibling vibe towards the end, and it's like, let's just get this done. And I love that.
It was nice too, because it has more natural storytelling to put out the story than just, narrating to the audience. If Ben, being the outsider, doesn't know what's going on, you now have Amy there going, this is what's going on in that banter moment.
Yeah, so, it is a good expositionary device to have someone who can explain within the context of a scene where it would make perfect sense to have that conversation. And I think vice versa too, because really the story, as much as things happen and it's a horror and there's action and stuff, is what we've already discussed. It's really Ben's arc is the true thrust of the story. So he gets his exposition moments as well in return by virtue of Amy existing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I find what I found really useful to me as an actor was to follow that journey where ideally Ben would like nobody else to be there. So, when Amy comes along, it's a pain in the bum, in the rear end. But he comes to realize he needs her, and then they come closer and closer and closer together until they're working together. You know what I mean? So
it was a nice natural progression.
Exactly.
Yes. So now with that, how much into the script did you have to change? Like when you had your written word down and then you guys actually started getting together, doing the chemistry and stuff, was there a lot that had to change to make it seem that natural?
We improvised a good amount, I'd say. Also, what's nice about we all lived on the same street, street-ish, as much as a street can be in this northern part of Ontario. But where I was staying was just down the road from where they were staying. So I'd wake up and I'd be like, Scott, Adrian, I think maybe we should do this. We should say this here and this. And so before each day of shooting, we'd have a nice meeting of maybe we should be saying this. You know what I mean? So each day it was changing for the better, I think. It was a constant negotiation and collaboration, which was lovely.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also Scott, you can speak to this as well. Beyond just sort of the writing and the acting, I know that Scott and Nelson did the exact same thing before every shoot day as well. So even though, you know, was a shoot schedule and there were planned shots, there was still that sort of collaborative day out. But I'll mute myself. Scott, you.
Okay, we'll come back to Scott in 1 second.
Yeah.
Everybody out there watching, we hope you enjoyed not only the film, but our little Q&A chit chat right here. If you want to hear what Scott's going to say here in a second, and probably a couple more questions that we're going to get to him, tune into bitsradio.ca and you can hear the rest of this. But for Blood in the Snow Film Festival, enjoy the rest of the festival and we'll see you all later. Now we're into podcast. Go right ahead, Scott. I want to hear this.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think they pretty much covered it. It was like I know when Nelson first approached me, we had worked together in the past, but never on something of this scale. And when we were chatting about workflow, we were both very much on the same page that we wanted to make sure this was a very collaborative shoot, that we were going to bring everybody's best and find the best possible like solutions and storytelling, and that carried over to the actors, and just having that discussion with them and being able to be like, okay, so what do you think about this line? Well, actually, I think the character wouldn't say this, so let's try switching it up and try this instead, and just really finding that relationship and trying to build that organically as we were shooting. So it was a really fantastic experience, and yeah, I'd like to think that it was a really collaborative shoot. It
feels like it just from the conversation we've had tonight.
Yeah, we're all buddies. I mean, even with some of the fighting references, like some of the kind of words and originally in the script, there were a couple things where I was like, you know, fighter wouldn't really say it like that. It's more like this. And so it was nice that the script could change in that way.
Well,
in the moment, right?
Well, yeah, but you guys were wearing multiple hats through this whole thing. Like, was that a challenge for you guys? Because like you all got together for writing, it says, all were producing, and then you had your individual roles as director and actors. Did that take a toll? Like, did you find that to be a hurdle?
It definitely wasn't easier to do that. That's for sure. I mean, I think like our DP Nelson, I definitely got more gray hair by the end of it. But yeah, we were definitely, because we shot initially in 2020, we were following very strict COVID protocols. So we could only have a certain amount of people and crew in the house at any given time. So a lot of the time we were pulling double duty. So I'd be helping the production designer build the scarecrow, or like I'd literally be down on my knees helping hook up we couldn't really even have much of a gaffer team or grips. Like our DP was pretty much like doing most of the lighting himself. Like it was very much as indie as it gets.
And Scott carried a lot of that burden. So my hat's off to him. I don't know how he did it, but he worked very hard, very hard.
So
he did. I mean, when we talk about all the multiple hats, I do think that eventually once you get on set, especially with the actor, you end up being sort of as an actor focused on the acting. Now we were all three of us producing. There were some things going on, obviously behind the scenes, that we had to take care of. Even something that says catering, getting making sure that those orders were accurate.
Ben got to eat.
Oh God, yeah. But ultimately, because it does take I think a completely different brain. Scott, I mean, it's so hard to express just how much and what Scott did, especially on the day, but in post as well. Heck, we edited the film, but he did the rough cut on his own. I jumped in, then we brought on our editor Sam later after that. It's just all these hats that you wouldn't expect that Scott would be wearing. Like he was pulling focus on occasion. So I'm just saying, like, there are just so many you wouldn't even know. You would be stunned, jaw on floor.
So I'm sitting here asking what it was like wearing 3 hats when the guy was probably wearing about 15 to 20 at any given moment.
Yeah.
I do want to put out there though that like the only reason this movie got made was our incredible cast and crew, who were just all wearing so many hats, and we're just like, even at times, like our costume designer like we were so limited on the amount of people we could have in the house and how many people, like we were often like, I was sending the production designer photos because we couldn't be in the house at the time. Like it was a quite a unique filmmaking experience, and it only succeeded because of this incredibly talented cast and crew.
It does sound like that forced you to wear more hats than you normally would.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
no, absolutely. Yeah, it was unique challenges. Like even things like having our fight coordinator and me figuring out how to keep the props and weapons COVID safe, because
Right.
especially early days, we didn't know exactly like what was safe and what wasn't. So we were sealing weapons and buckets and airproof buckets and things like that. Like it was definitely the first time, a first for me at least, with anything of that sort of nature.
does this feel like a template that you might want to visit in the future as far as efficiency or, you know, speed for making a film?
I mean, I always like I think that filmmaking is always going to be a race for time and a race for money. And I think that no matter what level you get to, it's always a challenge. And I think I feel so proud of us for being able to do it. And I would definitely do it again. But lessons were learned for sure, like especially because it was the first time I've ever been in a pandemic and filmmaking in a pandemic. So, but yeah, I do feel a bit like I was like, okay, I ran that race. Now that things are changing and being a little bit easier and easing the restrictions a bit, I'm like, oh yeah, throw it at me. Like we did this. We did this during a global apocalypse. We can do this anytime.
I can handle anything now. Yes.
Yeah.
With COVID being like it was then, did it ever restrict not only your writing, but what you could film? Like did the script or the film have to suffer because of the restrictions?
I don't think so. Like we knew what, like from the get-go, I knew I wanted to do a movie with Ryan, and I'd had it for a long time. He's just this fantastic actor, and I think he's very unique in that he's a big guy, 6 foot. He's physically like can be very capable. He's a martial artist, but also has this fantastic vulnerability on screen. And I just thought that would be such an interesting take for a lead on a horror movie. And then I knew I wanted to do something with flipping the concept of, instead of like, I'm a big fan of The Stranger or The Strangers in the Purge and things like that, but it's the idea of people breaking into the house. I love this idea of a character slowly realizing people are trying to lure you out of a house and into the dark. And I was like, how many ways can we play with that? And I was like, okay, so I know we're going to be in a house. I know it's going to be a bit of a bottle movie that way. And I was like, okay, I guess it says it's actually going to work really well for the pandemic. So it sort of was symbiotic in a way.
Mm.
That's excellent.
I called
think
it
the
in my
hard.
notes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just called it in my notes the anti-invasion movie.
Right,
Home
exactly.
invasion, anti-home invasion.
Home invasion.
I was thinking that as an actor, the biggest difference I found shooting during the pandemic was normally I like to find hiding places for my sides. You know, when we're about to we rehearse, I'm like, okay, let me just hide these somewhere where the camera can't see them. And now with the pandemic, I have to not only find a place for my sides, but to hide my mask. You know what I mean? So it's like, because you have it on until we're ready to go, and you take it off, and where can I put this where no one will see it?
Exactly. If you're going to do that one take with part of it sticking out of your pocket.
Exactly. And that's what you don't want.
I'll fix it in post.
Can I ask a question about Mason? Like, he was so amazing as the bad guy, you know, the possessed guy. He was so good. Like, where did you find him?
So again,
Craigslist.
it's yeah, Craigslist. Yeah, it's just no. This really was, you know, we got a barn, we've got the time, and we also have some talented people in our circle. Let's put on a show. And we've known Jason a fair bit for a while, and may I take credit? We were talking about casting, and I was like, I got the guy. I know the guy. Not sure if you've seen Clichet, one of my favorite movies, but when Hank Azaria's just running across after he finds, he's like, I got the guy. And I was like, yeah, Jason will be, and I reached out, and it was really funny because I was like, hey, would you be interested in possibly doing the big bad for our movie? And he's like, oh yeah, no, I love that. I do really, and I got nervous when I started to read, I really, I'm like, what's he gonna want? What's he gonna want? He's like, I really, really like to play unremittingly evil, like people, like supremely evil. No, and I'm like, oh phew, well, have I got a role? Oh yeah.
Oh, we got you, bro.
Yeah. And he's it's funny because he's the nicest guy ever.
Yes.
He's nothing like, there's nothing in Jason that's Mason, except maybe the voice, obviously. But no, he's the nicest guy who likes to do a lot of yoga. So.
And also, this is something though I would like to plug just for like the acting world. Like all the actors in this are also theater people. And then we had at least two in Mason and Ryan who are trained opera singers. And I think you see that with both of them, but especially when we talk about Mason and the voice work he did. We did, some mixing during some moments where he's not present, but the scenes where he's there and doing some of the other voice work that he's doing, sound isn't futzing with that. That's just, an actor using their instrument. And I just think we had this sort of group of actors who are used to doing also theater and singing, and it's all the tools you can to make a tiny, small, intimate horror movie still being an opera singer useful.
I can see where that would be useful, especially with the outside stuff yelling into the house. You would get clean audio. Whereas normally having a theater background in film is a detriment because the sound guy keeps yelling at you.
Bring it down. Bring it down.
Smaller.
We mentioned the connection to Night of the Living Dead. I also like how you flipped the opening because it's the exact opposite of Night of the Living Dead. Barbara stumbles into the house and finds Ben. Here you've got Ben coming into the house and finding Amy, which again I thought was a brilliant homage without being an homage, if you know what I mean. But yeah, Ryan, you and again I keep making this Night of the Living Dead thing. You channeled Ben from that film like almost perfectly because he's that calm every guy, he's not puffing up and being all gruff and stuff, but he's still there making himself known. And I got to commend both of you on being able to do that and still say normal.
It's helpful when you're working with like your friends, right? So like when we said cut, it was cut and we could make a joke, you know what I mean? Or after we were finished we wrap that day, have a couple of drinks and talk about how it went. And I think it's super important for all actors to give themselves permission to leave the character behind when it's work, so you can step away. When you're in 100%, but it's important to step away, certainly for your mental health.
Mm-hmm. I was actually about to say that I think that of the horror tropes that we were sort of, again, we were bringing our own selves to it, but it is nice to talk about inspirations and stuff as well. I think mine probably was mostly closely with Shelley Duvall from The Shining. So I do think, especially aesthetically, but even just a constant level of buzzing of pen, but which then makes Ryan's comment all the more not ironic, but I definitely believe that the actor should be allowed to step away from mental health from a role. So yes, we would have drinks at dawn, basically. It
was all a night shoot, right?
Yeah.
Did you say that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was all over nights. It was an intense experience.
Since we have all the producers here, this is a question I can ask. Is Mason's story done, or will we be revisiting this universe?
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely vague on purpose. That's all I'll say. I mean,
Carpenter-esque. Yep. Okay, I can accept that as an answer. Carolyn, any other questions?
Just going back to all the references, this is my weird deep cut because I've watched horror since I was a kid. I'm a total horror hound. But the scene where they're looking through the newspaper clippings and they get the recording. First of all, in terms of revealing exposition and revealing the story, I thought that was so brilliant because there's so many, like you could have had a character going, I am telling what is happening and what happened in the past, right? And but you didn't. You used like a tape recorder. Like it's so simple yet so brilliant. But it reminded me of, okay, does anybody know the 1980 something or other film called The Monster Club? I don't know if anybody knows that movie. It's with Vincent Price and David Carradine. And Vincent Price, it's an anthology film, a British anthology film. I can't remember. It's taken from a book. And so they made it into a film. And one of the segments is called The Hume Goo. And it's about this, you would all love it because it's about a movie producer and director going to a small town and looking for a set, right?
Oh, wow.
And he drives into this set, and it's this like it's kind of a barrier of mist. Goes into this town, and nothing's changed. And it turns out that they're like these creatures, and it really reminded me of that. And I'm like, that is so cool that I was wondering if you had seen that film, but it just kind of drew from like classic horror, like almost classic I don't want to say Amicus, but like that British Hammer horror type feel. And that's why I love this movie so much, because it kind of ticked off all the boxes for me. It was just so interesting.
Oh,
yes,
that's great.
Monster Club. Yeah, I don't know. It's a deep cut, but it's one of my favorite top 5 films. So if you ever catch it, it's really good.
I love that. I wish I could say I had seen it and had drawn the influence from there. I unfortunately didn't, but I'm going to be watching that now. That sounds amazing.
Oh, it's so good. It's cheesy and it's 80s, but it's good.
Oh, that's my bread and butter right there. I definitely the Hammer horrors were definitely a big influence. And then I also, as a kid, I grew up on radio dramas and on audiobooks and things like that. So I definitely thought it was a really fun, effective way to sort of not only play with the visual storytelling, but also the audio storytelling a bit and do it in a fun way.
Can I also just talk a little bit about the behind the scenes of the tape recorder bit? Because we were doing our acting thing, staring at a tape recorder, but we needed to react to stuff. So Jason, who played Mason, it's very confusing, Jason Mason, and then a few others offset, just read just sort of off over there, out of frame, the actual thing, but they were 100% in it and acting, and it was like just sitting there listening to a radio play as you're still performing, in your characters. But it was this amazing, and we did several takes of it. But so it was really interesting. I mean, subsequently, it's obviously ADR and everything in what you actually see in the movie. But it was this really weirdly creepy, cozy, I don't know, experience. We were just all in the living room and like almost like around a fire listening to this story. It was a really, really interesting filming experience, I thought.
Excellent. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this. Now you are BITS alumni, so please, anytime you have projects coming up or anything, get a hold of us because we'd love to hear what you're doing in the future.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, man. That's so nice.
Yes, thank you so much. We're so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, for BITS Radio, I'm Rob with Carolyn today, and we will see you later.